Good evening. Sir Keir Starmer is being labelled a traitor and a national disgrace by our brave military veterans. He's accused of taking part in a witch hunt against Britain's military heroes and doing it all for free. I don't think anyone in their right mind can think that man can be our Prime Minister after hearing these devastating revelations in today's Daily Telegraph. Both Starmer and his great friend, now our Attorney General Lord Hermer, worked for free on a case that led to hundreds of Iraq war veterans being hounded and subjected to years of investigations, accused of crimes they did not commit. Starmer and Hermer, for free, gave legal advice that said a British war hero who had already been found not guilty of murder twice should face an investigation again. Starmer and Hermer, for free, represented interveners including Amnesty International and made submissions to the court that a British war hero who had already been cleared of wrongdoing by the military had not been properly investigated. It took Sergeant Richie Cattrall 13 years to clear his name. He was eventually exonerated following an investigation and a separate inquiry. But the whole process saw him develop PTSD, sadly, apparently, turn to drink and attempt suicide multiple times. He also suffered a stroke.
Gutted, because he's now the Prime Minister and he's getting troops done. He's literally going for troops that are doing the job.
That case ultimately led to what some are calling a witch hunt against more soldiers. And according to the Daily Telegraph, Keir Starmer argued that because British troops were in control of parts of Iraq during the Iraq War, the UK was therefore legally obliged to conduct fresh investigations into their behaviour under European human rights law. Now, this was initially rejected by the Court of Appeal, but the case was then taken to the ECHR, who forced the UK to reopen investigations into these British soldiers. Now, Keir Starmer claims he had nothing to do with the ECHR case. By the way, I've got some news for you very shortly on that. But I don't think that's relevant, whatever he claims, because his advice probably led to the subsequent investigations. It gets worse. According to reports, the allegations cited by Sir Keir were found to be based in part on a false document intended to pin the blame on British troops. Now, although Downing Street have denied it, the Daily Telegraph say that Starmer worked alongside disgraced former lawyer Phil Shiner, who was later struck off by the Solicitors Regulation Authority for dishonesty, which included fabricating evidence and making false representations to courts. Look at these two. These men now run our country. What kind of a man works for free on a case that led to investigations of British military heroes? How have they ended up in charge of our great country? The mask has slipped for Sir Keir Starmer over this. He's represented various enemies of the state, IRA terrorists. He's represented Al-Qaeda chief Abu Qatada. He represented the now banned Islamist terrorist group Hizb ut-Tahrir in the ECHR, trying to get them off the banned list in Germany. But he's always been able to claim that he was using the cab rank rule, that he didn't get to pick and choose his clients, that representing a procession of enemies of Britain was just an unhappy coincidence. But on this case, he worked for free. No cab rank rule applies. It was a choice he made. Do you not think that's a bit weird? In a way, it all makes sense now. He's desperate to give away Britain's most vital military base, the Chagos Islands. He's just pushed through a law that could see countless Northern Ireland veterans in their 70s and 80s dragged into court to face historic allegations. This is the man who appeared to take his poppy off when he was doing a video about Islamophobia Awareness Month. He used to want to abolish the royal family.
I often used to propose the abolition of the monarchy.
The brass neck of this snivelling little human rights lawyer to say this just the other day.
I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured.
Look, of course he was right to say that about Trump, don't get me wrong. But now it turns out that he worked on a case that opened the door for more criminal inquiries into our brave veterans. Sir Keir Starmer should apologise to veterans, he should hang his head in shame, and he should resign. And get a load of this, because the breaking news tonight, right now, in the Daily Telegraph is this. In a 2008 book, Sir Keir Starmer called for European human rights laws to be used to investigate British troops in Iraq. In the academic article, the now Prime Minister wrote that ECHR laws were, quote, far more effective than United Nations international laws, which he argued had been interpreted and developed by the US and the UK to suit them. The article was published in a 2008 book entitled The Iraq War and International Law. Who do you think put that book together? Oh, it was that lawyer Phil Shiner, who was subsequently convicted of fraud and struck off as a solicitor over false claims of abuse made against British soldiers. But Sir Keir Starmer's spokesman insisted that the Prime Minister had just assisted the court on points of law, not to advocate for either side. They also, of course, insist that he didn't work with Phil Shiner on this.
Every time your phone connects to public Wi-Fi, anyone nearby could snoop on what you're doing. Hackers can steal your information, passwords, photos, and bank details in just seconds. ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. ExpressVPN is so easy to use. With just one click of a button, you're protected. Streaming, banking, or shopping, you can switch between high-speed servers worldwide in seconds, and your connection never slows down. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free, all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your online life today.
Let's get thoughts of my panel. We've got senior political correspondent at Daily Express, Christian Cowgie, Reform councillor Russell Quirk, and journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Russell, does he have to go?
He does, and it's yet another instance. I mean, how many issues have there been over the last 18 months where genuinely and with merit people have called for Keir Starmer's resignation? I mean, this isn't the first time by any stretch. And look, when we go back in history to how Keir Starmer behaved, 20 or so years ago, I think it's fair to say that they were and are his true colours. He can now stand up, and have a pop at Donald Trump for saying that, our veterans haven't done much over the last few years, and he can pretend to defend them. But at the same time, we all know now from this story, which I think is very, very telling indeed, that this individual sought to do everything he possibly could to relentlessly pursue veterans, ironically those that he and his party had sent to war in Iraq in the first place. It was a Labour vote that did that based on a dodgy dossier. The irony of that should not be lost on us. The sectors of society that this man and his party have persecuted and vilified, whether it be business owners, publicans, farmers, waspy women, pensioners, and now veterans. I think we know the making of this man now, don't we, for real? He is plastic. He is pretending to be patriotic and for Britain. It's very, very clear he doesn't like Britain and he doesn't like Britons.
Look, one thing I will say is this. Yesterday, Downing Street were not happy with that report in the Daily Telegraph, that big revelation that they had yesterday. They were really unhappy about it. And they were at pains to stress that Sir Keir Starmer was not advocating for either side. He was there to make points of law. They said he didn't work with Phil Shiner on it. OK, right. But then today, they also said he didn't have a hand in that case ultimately going to the ECHR and being successful. Today's allegations in the Daily Telegraph, the headline, Starmer used the ECHR to investigate British troops, and they say that he wrote a chapter in a book by that disgraced lawyer saying just that.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't pass the sniff test, does it? There's a lot of very, very funny coincidences here. And I'd also suggest, and I mean, goodness me, it's easy to poke holes in Keir Starmer's media comm strategy coming out of Downing Street these days. But they could have very easily said, yes, we provided pro bono work on this case. It created a very regrettable precedent that has been used in ways that are abhorrent. But they didn't, did they? They tried washing their hands of it. And I think that reveals the character of the man. I think what also reveals the character of the man is what the Telegraph's revealing this evening, that Keir Starmer said the ECHR should be used to prosecute British troops because the UN is too favourable to Britain and America. Think about that. I think the underlying thread of all of this is that I don't believe that Keir Starmer is actively anti-British in the way that, for example, Jeremy Corbyn was. But I do believe that for his entire life, Keir Starmer has thought that he answers to a higher power and there are things more important than national sovereignty
but can we just be clear,
and national
Christys,
interest.
sorry, can we just be, before Nina comes in, can we just be very, very clear here? These were veterans that had not once but twice in the main been exonerated. That Keir Starmer, giving that advice, then allowed the authorities and the judicial system to pursue again, even though they'd been cleared not once but twice.
OK.
Richie there, that you just had on in the VT, 13 years it took him to clear his name because of Keir Starmer.
Yeah. No, look, what they will say, and no doubt they do say, / will say tomorrow, is that the book in question in this latest revelation for the Daily Telegraph, in which Keir Starmer wrote a chapter for this disgraced lawyer who was struck off in part for fraudulently making up evidence about British troops, was written in 2008. So he will have had no idea at this point that this guy had done anything wrong. The ECHR ruling that followed it was in 2011, that Keir Starmer obviously claims he had nothing to do with. Nina, there's no getting around what absolutely catastrophic luck this is for the Prime Minister. All round. The company he kept, the cases he got involved in, the fact that he did it for free, so that there's no cab rank rule whatsoever, and the fact that he is now the man in charge of our armed forces who has just helped to pass a law that will prosecute British veterans.
This is extrapolating the facts to a ludicrous level. It is the idea that Keir Starmer is anti-British is quite ludicrous.
He doesn't seem to like many of the sectors of our society.
Can I just finish? Three men have talked so long and not allowed a woman to come in till now. OK, how long have the three of you been talking? Thank you. It was 2007 that this case that he took pro bono. Now, he's perfectly entitled to take a pro bono case. He's worked for Amnesty International. These are all very worthy causes, you would imagine. You wouldn't go against Amnesty International, for instance.
Prosecuting British veterans?
No, but the thing is, a barrister is just an instrument of the law.
When he's paid.
But he chose to take the case.
But he chose to take the case because he was being asked to assist on points of law.
For free.
That's exactly what he did.
Why would you do it for free?
Well,
with respect, Nina, you wouldn't turn up
pro
here for
bono,
free, would you?
because he believes in justice. Can any of you say to me, have there been any war crimes committed by British troops?
Possibly, but not in the cases that happened here.
No, not that particular case. But it's quite true that war crimes are committed, and when they are committed, we should know about them, and whoever perpetrated them should be prosecuted. And because you cannot. Okay. Hang on. You talked long enough. As you said rightly, in 2000.
You can talk for the rest of the show, Nina. Sorry.
I have hardly said a word. You talked.
Right, can we just get on with this, please, everyone?
Thank you. It was you that interrupted. So in 2008, he became DPP, and after that had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Right.
So the fact that China was later found to be a fraud and struck off was a decade beyond when he'd had any dealings with him at all. So I will not take it that he was somehow marred with a crook and in cahoots to make the veterans somehow go through torture.
I'm just going to say, the only time I ever do anything for free, to be honest, if I feel really passionately about something, I'll just leave that there. So the fact that Keir Starmer, by choice, did this for nothing means, at that time, he felt passionately that those soldiers should be prosecuted, even though they've been let off.
How can this bloke be essentially in charge of the military?
But he can't. Look, Nina can say all she likes. No, hang on. Now you're interrupting. Nina can say all she likes that Keir Starmer is not anti-British. All of the evidence, I'm afraid, is there. Look how he's treated our pensioners.
This is paranoia on your part.
No, it's
complete
reality.
Paranoia.
It's fact.
It is not real. Do you think if he didn't care about Britain, he would put himself through this horrendous job of trying to repair the country after the Tories left it in a terrible state?
What he's doing to Britain and our economy, his agenda is to destroy it.
As a political animal for the Daily Express, how damaging is yesterday's revelation and then tonight's revelation, both in the Daily Telegraph, about Keir Starmer?
Well, look, I would suggest that people who don't like Keir Starmer are going to see it as further proof of everything they've suspected. The key thing, I know that a lot of this seems really historical, and so you could say, look, that's in the past and whatever. The issue is that you can draw a direct line between what Keir Starmer was doing and arguing in 2008 to 2011...
Points of law.
...and the stuff that is going on in the courts to do with Northern Ireland at the moment. You've got to remember that the Tories introduced a law that wasn't perfect but granted immunity to soldiers and indeed IRA terrorists in Northern Ireland. The reason Labour's reopened that is because the ECHR told them to. And that's now what's threatening to take British troops through the courts again. And again, I just think that we should have a Prime Minister that prioritises British interest and not international law and his mates in the legal system.
The revelations in the last 2 days are that Keir Starmer worked for free advising on a point of law, and that point of law suggested that one bloke specifically as well could be retrospectively, historically tried again, despite being found not guilty twice, essentially because the case didn't meet the standards of the ECHR, right? They say they had nothing to do with the ECHR case. That then opened the door for hundreds of other people to face prosecution or investigations. And then tonight the revelation is that he literally wrote a chapter in a book about how people should use the ECHR to investigate the troops. So that is it. Now, obviously, you know, he will say, we're going to hear from a Downing Street spokesperson, right? And this is what they have to say, which is, as the Prime Minister made clear last week, he will never forget the courage, bravery and sacrifice made for their country by British servicemen and women. During his career, the Prime Minister has represented British soldiers who were killed in action and were wrongly accused. The Prime Minister did not represent claimants in this case. He represented interveners, including the Law Society of England and Wales. The role of an intervener is to assist the court on points of law, not to advocate for either side. The Prime Minister was not involved in the subsequent case heard in the European Court of Human Rights. Now, on the latest lines, which did only land about 20-odd minutes ago, GB News have approached Downing Street for comment tonight, and we will bring you them as soon as we can. But a Downing Street spokesperson told The Telegraph that the role of the intervener is to assist the court on points of law, not to advocate for either side. There you go. So it's the same quote. Right.